So if I let light in, it's not going to look good, right? So, no, we won't do that.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience. Again, technology is tricky, but we're really excited to start off tonight. So I would like to briefly introduce our 4 speakers before I go over the format of tonight's discussion, and then we'll get started. So first up, we have Representative Lori Ehrlich. Representative Ehrlich has served in the Massachusetts State Legislature since 2008, representing the Commonwealth's 8th Essex District, which includes neighborhoods from Marblehead, Swampscott, and Lynn. Representative Ehrlich is a well-known environmental champion, and she has sponsored and co-sponsored hundreds of bills during her time in office, some of which include legislation for gas leak prevention, anti-bullying, and protective measures against sexual assault on college campuses. Representative Ehrlich, we are so excited to have you here tonight, so thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Next up we have, of course, thank you. Next up we have Alexis Earp. Alexis is a current sophomore at Marblehead High School who is involved in almost every corner of student life, whether that means serving as the secretary of the Marblehead High School Democrats, the service hours coordinator for our Environmental Honor Society, or even sitting on the Marblehead Task Force Against Discrimination. In her 2 years at MHS, Alexis has already made a huge impact on the school community, so we appreciate you being here tonight, Alexis. After Alexis, we are excited to hear from Victoria Ireton. Victoria is the former deputy campaign manager for Congressman Seth Moulton, leading Representative Moulton to victory in November of 2018. And after completing this campaign, Victoria transitioned into work at the Boston-based lobbying firm 10X Strategies, where she now works as an account executive. Before becoming politically involved, Victoria graduated from Suffolk University with a dual degree in government and philosophy, and she has overcome personal struggle in her life to fight for a system that supports students like her. So we thank you for your time, Victoria. Finally, we have a former teacher of mine and someone who I know that many MHS students look up to, Lindsay Donaldson. Ms. Donaldson has taught in the MHS Social Studies department for many years, specifically teaching courses on world cultures, Western traditions, psychology, and I now guess sociology as well, always finding a way to incorporate current events into the classroom. We have plenty to learn here tonight, so thank you, Ms. Donaldson, for participating. Very soon we will hear from these 4 speakers, and after they each describe their history of civic engagement to the audience, we will open up to an audience Q&A. So we ask that everyone at home please consider what you may want to ask these 4. And as they share their stories, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box, which, if you are on a computer, should be on the right-hand side of your screen, and if you are on a phone, should be at the bottom. My new co-chair, May Genovese, will be sending me many of your questions to ask the speakers, so we can't wait to hear from you all. Rest assured, in case there are any technical difficulties, we are recording this meeting tonight, and we will send you a link to this discussion tomorrow. Now, I thank you all for your patience as I introduced this event and underwent some technical difficulties. And without further ado, we have Representative Lori Ehrlich here to describe her civic engagement journey. So Lori, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you. Can you hear me okay, Sophie? Everybody hear me okay? All right, thank you for the lovely introduction, and I could not be more honored to be here tonight talking about civic engagement. It's right now is the time we all need to get engaged, so I'm really thrilled to hopefully, learn from you as much as you can learn from me. I thought it would be interesting to your audience to kind of take you back in time a little bit and just share with you how I got caught up in something that I was not trained for, not meant to be. I became a very unlikely activist. And let me tell you, it's a very local story. So I think maybe your audience will, they'll recognize some of these landmarks. I'm going to take you all back to like 1997. I used to be able to talk to high school crowds and say right around when you guys were being born, but I think you guys weren't born yet back in 97. So at that point in my life, I was married. I had 2 daughters. My youngest one was still a baby. She was in diapers. And my oldest one was a toddler. And it was a really hot summer day in 1997. The kids were running around on the deck, singing songs. And I decided, my husband and I, we were hot. We wanted to go visit my parents. My parents had a pool. So I said, all right, girls, come on in. We're going to pack up some sandwiches and go over to Grandma and Grandpa's. And they came running in, still singing this song and running around the kitchen table. Now I have white tiles on my kitchen floor. And I looked down at the floor. Now I was a very busy mom. I'm also a certified public accountant, and I had my own practice at that point. So I looked down at the floor and saw all these little black footprints in a ring around the kitchen table. And my first thought was like, oh, shoot, I just cleaned the floor. What a pain. It's going to be something, it'll take more time out of my day. But then I went and got a sponge and I went to go clean up the little footprints and they were greasy. So then I started thinking, well, what were they stepping in? They were just on the deck. So my husband goes out to the deck and he says, honey, come out here. He points at the deck and everything was covered with this layer of black soot. Like really, you could really see it, but then you could touch it and it was greasy. So I was really puzzled, like what is raining down on us, in the middle of Marblehead. So later on that day, when I was with my parents, my dad was born and raised in Salem. And I mentioned the story to my parents, and my dad said, I wonder if it's from the power plant. And my first reaction was, what power plant? And he said, that huge, gigantic, hulking power plant on our horizon. And it was like, I had never noticed it. It had been there my entire life. It was there in 1952, it was installed. I never noticed it. So started thinking about what are they doing over there? I found out they're burning coal. My dad knew all about it. So I called them up on Monday and I said, hey, you guys, my stuff is covered with the soot. Is it from you? So they said, well, we don't know. We'll send somebody over. So it took about a month. They scheduled an appointment for me. They sent an insurance adjuster to my house. The insurance adjuster took samples from all over the deck, sent it off to a lab. And then about a month after that, I got a letter saying, dear Mrs. Ehrlich, by the way, it could be from us. They didn't share the results with me, but they said it could be from us. And as part of our Good Neighbor program, we would like to power wash your deck for you free of charge, no problem. And I stood holding that letter and I looked down at my little girls and I said, wait a minute, but let me go on. The letter went on to say, we will power wash your deck free of charge if you release us from liability. In other words, you won't sue us for anything we did in the past, anything in the future, anything in the present. You won't do that. And I all kinds of alarm bells went off. I started writing letters to the editor. Is anybody else having this? They literally overnight transformed me into what headlines in the future referred to me as Mother Grizzly from Marblehead, protecting her young. And I was also called the East Coast Erin Brockovich. But before I even got to that point for those headlines, I ended up really organizing the community. I ended up working with some wonderful people in Marblehead, real champs, real heroes. We got together, we formed a group called HealthLink, and we advocated not just in Marblehead, but all of the surrounding communities to clean up this power plant. We delved into the science. We learned how dangerous it is to have a coal plant in your backyard and how the plant never bothered to put scrubbers on their stacks. So it was like we were all smoking unfiltered cigarettes, or, we were exposed to the equivalent of what miners are exposed to in coal mines. It was very unhealthy. And we learned about statistics and we learned about politics. I mean, I was the most apolitical person. And suddenly I find myself talking to governors and up at the State House all the time and really just banging on the door, just somebody please listen to me. I found I had a very receptive representative, Doug Peterson, who was my predecessor, and he was great. I found that people weren't listening to him necessarily. And I was up there advocating, testifying for bills, encouraging the filing of bills, and I got caught up in the process. So I ended up, over the years, we ended up not only shutting down the coal plant, which was there since 1952, but I also discovered that waste from the coal plant was being dumped up in Beverly. And coal, when you burn it, it produces tons and tons of this fly ash, which is really toxic waste. And they were just dumping it in this hollowed out gravel quarry up in Beverly. And over time, there was a stream running through it, and 50 feet from this quarry pit was a beautiful lake that 80,000 local people were drinking out of. It's called Wenham Lake. All of Salem, all of Beverly, and parts of Wenham. So I discovered this. There's a whole long story. I could really go on for the full time of this thing with stories, but long story short, it took 6 years to actually clean up the drinking water. There was 6 feet of power plant waste at the bottom of this beautiful drinking water supply, this beautiful lake, beautiful reservoir, and you should go up there and see it someday, as long as you guys are all local. And we ended up we had so many stakeholders around the table. I brought together, there were 3 communities, so all of the elected officials in all 3 communities. We had everything from the Army Corps of Engineer, because it's drinking water. We had the Mass DEP, the Solid Waste Department in Mass DEP. We had, the governors were interested. It took 100 days of getting all the stakeholders together around the table for the original owner of the power plant, which is a company called New England Power that was actually bought by National Grid, to kind of cry uncle, because I had partnered with a very high profile attorney who lives in Beverly, and this is his drinking water, who was actually played by John Travolta in A Civil Action, if you ever see the movie. So he lives up in Beverly. So I partnered with him, and the company came forward and said, okay, uncle, we're going to clean this up. We're going to pay for it. We had already spent tens of thousands of dollars on testing to find out what was going on. They reimbursed us for the testing. And, it took 6 years, but it got cleaned up. So anyhow, I was a full-time activist. I mean, my clients, my poor neglected clients stuck with me for the most part, but that everything was on extension. And it was a full-time job that didn't pay anything. It was all volunteer. So it wasn't really a job. But I ended up saying, okay, whoa, okay, I am part of something that is much bigger than what's going on in Marblehead. I'm part of, clearly I've had exposure at the state level. I know what's going on there. I know the levers to pull, but there's also a national story here. And of course, there's a global story. Back in 1997, it was like me and Al Gore were the only ones talking about global warming, honestly. And so I needed to learn more about that. So I applied to Harvard for a master's degree, and they took me. So I ended up getting a master's at Harvard, and then learning a lot of policy, working with giants in the energy field and other areas. And then I graduated and actually went back to my accounting practice, which was kind of sad. Except my state rep ended up, after 17 years in office, he decided not to run again. Or he decided to actually, he became Secretary of Agriculture in Massachusetts and left at the very end of his term. So there was a quick special election. There are 5 of us that jumped in, and I won that primary and a general. And then at my victory party for that, I was already collecting signatures for the next round. So I had another primary and another general all in 1 year. So 4 races in 1 year. But, and I've had races since then, but basically it's been 12 years of really being able to focus on so many policy areas that you would expect me to be focused on, like the gas leak issue is very much in my wheelhouse. But I've also been able to focus on things like sensible gun laws. Right now, all attention is on, really demanding institutional change to get at the issues of racism and police brutality. Some of the other things that I focused on, I think Sophie mentioned sexual violence on college campuses. I have a newspaper bill. I'm trying to save local newspapers to support journalists. And so we have a functioning democracy. I'm trying to, I actually had great success reining in non-competes, which is an employment law issue that you guys should all be aware of as you go out into the work world. I've led on a bill getting the lead out of school drinking water. Elephants and rhinos, I'm trying to keep them on planet Earth so they're not poached to extinction. So we're trying to ban ivory and rhino horn trade. I also have something on traveling circuses. I led on a 48 state poaching compact that we are the last state in the country to get into. So hopefully we'll have that wrapped up in a few weeks. I think that the thing that, I wasn't quite prepared for was, that you really, passion can turn into something incredibly useful to the world and satisfying personally. Um, I I never want to go back to my accounting practice again. I'm really, really happy to wake up every morning and say, okay, how do I get to help people today? How do I get to help, even elephants and rhinos? How can I be useful today and follow my passions? So, right now we're at you know, um, a really tumultuous time for our democracy. And I have found the most inspiring thing about this time is that young people are stepping up and using their incredible organizational skills, their comfort with communication, their desire to show up. And in almost every single bill I've filed, I have encountered young people who have just been incredibly inspiring. Right now, you guys are engaged in, certainly climate crisis, certainly what's going on right now with racism and police brutality. You've been, on the college campus bill that I'm filing. I'm working with students from all over Massachusetts, from college campuses all over Massachusetts, and they're organized, and it's just so gratifying, because sometimes you feel that you're kind of screaming out into the void that this is really important, but until you have a crowd of screaming young people behind you, people might not listen. So I guess my message is, you're very powerful. You're very powerful right now, and don't. Don't squander it, because it's your future we're fighting for, and it's your future. You want to live on a habitable planet, and you want to have a functional democracy. So the issues that I stand up on really are, I have, think about what inspired me at first, those little footprints. I mean, those footprints are now full-size adults. My kids are all grown up. But the next generation comes along, and I feel it's my mission to make, to leave the world a better place than when I found it. And I'm gonna need your partnership to do that. So, so I look forward to the question and answer. I hope I didn't go too long, Sophie.
No, no worries at all. Your love for your work and your job is truly infectious, and I think, there's so much we can all learn from that. I really appreciate how you bring up the youth perspective. And to speak more about youth civic engagement, we have Alexis Earp up next. Alexis, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Sophie, for introducing me, and thank you, Representative Ehrlich, for sharing your story. I've talked with you before, and it's always so inspiring to hear how you took action and created real change. Before I start with my story, I'd like to talk a little bit about what civic engagement means to me. And I think that civic engagement is engaging in your community to create a better and a just future. So if there's a change you want to see, or if there's a change that needs to happen so that the world is a better place for someone else, you need to be a part of creating that change. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that is involved with my story. So for me, I would say my civic engagement journey started when I was in 6th grade. And that was the 2015 to 2016 school year. So it was the year of the election, and that was on the forefront of everyone's minds. And that's really when I started to learn about national politics. And so I didn't have my own political opinions, though. As I was learning about national politics, I kind of just parroted back what I heard my family members saying. 6th grade is also when I got involved with service. I joined a club at my school, and I have my first vivid memory of working on a service project is as a part of that club. We were brainstorming fundraiser ideas, and someone brought up Flint, Michigan. And so this was 2016, and Flint, Michigan had lead in their water, and it wasn't safe for people to use. And so that memory of talking about Flint, Michigan, and learning about what the people there were going through without a clean water supply is my first memory of doing a service project. Throughout middle school, I stayed involved with service. I joined the service club at my middle school. And then in 8th grade, I had the honor and the pleasure of being selected as Marblehead's Project 351 ambassador. Project 351 is a youth-led service and leadership organization in Massachusetts. And it was founded 10 years ago by Carolyn Casey, who is on this call, along with Danielle, who is a member of the Project 351 staff. So thank you both for being here and for teaching me about service and how to be involved in my community. At the start of my freshman year, I did 2 service projects at my school with Project 351. And I also joined a lot of the service clubs at the high school. So if you're an 8th grader and you're watching this call, please join when you get to the high school next year. You'll have so many fantastic experiences, and it'll really change your outlook on different issues. By freshman year, I had definitely started forming my own political opinions, and I talked a lot with family and friends about them, but there was no action to support what I was saying. I just kind of went out and said what I thought. So Sophie, in the spring of my freshman year, asked me if I wanted to join the Marblehead High School Democrats. And I said yes, because I thought it would be a fantastic opportunity to get involved politically and to have some sort of action beside what I was saying to people about how I thought the world should be. So Dems has introduced me to so many great organizations, one of which is Voter Choice Massachusetts, and they're working to get something called ranked choice voting as a ballot question for this November. Over the summer before my sophomore year, I worked with them at a lobby day at the State House, which was fantastic because I didn't really know about state politics. I didn't know that Representative Ehrlich existed and that our Senator Brendan Crichton existed. I didn't know that we had that in Massachusetts. So going to the State House, learning about who my representatives were, learning that I had representatives, and being in an area where there were people from all sides of the political spectrum who were all coming together on this one issue was a really fantastic experience. And in the fall, I got the chance to be involved with RCV again. So I worked with them to collect signatures to get the question on the ballot. And that was really interesting because I learned about how much it really takes. It takes a wide movement of people across the state to get a question on the ballot. And I really appreciate that now, how difficult that is. Another event that happened over the summer before my sophomore year was the forest fires in the Amazon rainforest. And that really made a change for me because before I would have said, oh yeah, like I care about the climate crisis. We need to stop it. Like it's bad. It needs to end. But I didn't do anything about it. But when the forest fires in the Amazon rainforest, what is called the earth lungs, caught on fire, I was just stunned, and I was like, I need to do something. I need to be involved. So in the winter, I went to the Boston Climate Strike and I signed up to be a member of the Sunrise Movement, which is a national organization working to pass green legislation and elect leaders who will help pass that legislation. I'm still involved with them now, and it's been a phenomenal experience. And I think if 6th grade was the beginning of my civic engagement journey, the beginning of my sophomore year was really when I started to kind of take off in terms of actually taking action. Because another event that happened at the beginning of my sophomore year was my appointment as a student representative to the Marblehead Task Force Against Discrimination, along with 2 other students from a group called Team Harmony. And Team Harmony is a group that works with the Anti-League, and we do programs at the high school to teach students about how to recognize discrimination and how to fight back against that in the community. The Task Force Against Discrimination has a similar mission, but we do things more like on the town-wide scale. And we were hoping to do a couple screenings of some movies. Unfortunately, those got canceled due to coronavirus, but we're still working right now in support of the protests that are happening across the world, and also trying to implement a curriculum throughout all levels of Marblehead Public Schools so that children know at all ages how to recognize discrimination and how to stop it. So today we had a meeting with the Marblehead Board of Selectmen and the Marblehead Racial Justice Team to talk about what to do to support the Black Lives Matter protests happening, as I said, around the world. One activity that we've been doing as Team Harmony officers is to create a list of resources. And we've been doing this for a little over a week now. And that list of resources includes some mental health resources for Black people and people of color, actions people can take like signing petitions and calling different government officials, as well as a list of Black-owned businesses. And so to just kind of wrap up what I was saying and to come around full circle, Flint, Michigan. There's a girl and her name is Mari Kopany, and I encourage you all to look her up after this forum because she's truly inspiring. She started as an activist when she was 8 years old. She's from Flint, Michigan, and she's been fighting for clean water there since she was 8. She's turning 13 on July 6th, and she's trying to reach a fundraising goal to help bring clean water to Flint, Michigan, and to other places that don't have access to clean water. And so to kind of close off, I would say, again, if there's a better future that you want to strive for to make it a better society for your friends, your family, people that you don't know who you know are hurting for whatever reason, you need to be involved in that change, because when you're involved, you are making that change. And if everyone thinks, oh, well, someone else will do it and I can just stay back and say that I support it, then nothing's going to change. So please be involved. It's very easy. You can just Google how to be involved with X, and there will be so many resources available for you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Alexis. I mean, it's truly beyond inspiring to hear about all of your hard work. I know that so many of us at MHS are, reflecting on everything you've done, even just in these past 2 years at the school. We're so excited to see everything that you continue to accomplish here and beyond. And I know that our next speaker, Victoria Ireton, was also very inspired to become involved with politics through her education. So Victoria, would you like to take the floor and tell us about your civic engagement journey?
I would love to, and thank you so much for having me join the call tonight. Honestly, feel very honored. So I grew up in North Andover, Massachusetts, and I grew up in a very normal setting. Both my parents, sent me to a private school. I lived a very nice, comfortable life. And then my mom came down. She was very ill. She had cancer, multiple issues, and this is right before the '08 crisis. And we were drowning in medical debt, and we lost our home. It was foreclosed on, and we found ourselves homeless for a year and a half in an extended stay hotel. And I turned 16 in that kitchen in an extended stay hotel. And it was really that moment that it always comes back, because it was the day that I realized that my parents had done everything right and the government wasn't there to help. All these systems that they had paid into, all this hope, it wasn't there. And so that's when I decided, when I was, going to college, I was going to major in political science. And I found a mentor my first year, and she got me involved in a variety of things. So my civic engagement really started in college. I was working full-time at Chuck E. Cheese in high school to help support my family. So I wasn't as amazing as all of you. But when I got to college, I joined Student Government Association, which was great for on-campus policies. I took a class on elections and voting, and I actually was an election worker. So those people that help you vote at the locations, I was one of them in the city of Boston. And then fast forward to my senior year, I really wanted to do something impactful for my thesis. So I designed a financial literacy program for first-year students in one of their one credit courses. And I taught them about student loans, because a lot of times most students don't know what a loan fee is or an interest rate. And you're borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars to finance your education, which is a separate issue that I also think is wrong. But you should know what you're borrowing, right? And no one was having these conversations. So developed the program, and it was so rewarding. And I went off and I started sharing that program with nonprofits that Suffolk had connected me with that work with inner city youth. And then graduation comes, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And my mentor sent me a job description to be a finance assistant. You're a congressman. And I didn't know what funds. I worked for the congressman only on the campaign side. And I did anything from raising to operations and compliance. as sad as I was that Donald Trump was a bull experience that I've ever witnessed. And I was allowed to be creative in our community outreach and organize and gun safety and a wide variety of issues that fast forward, I was exhausted. Used to see me. I was just so tired. And I now work in government relations and I act as for private entities. So we're right now is we lobby for the Trucking Association of Massachusetts. And what's awesome is now like first responders, and they're kind of the most crucial people to get us what we need during this pandemic. But my big takeaway that I just want to share with all of you is that government needs your participation. It will not change unless you make it. I've seen that throughout my whole life, that education is power. And that's first step. But the second step is using that power and advocating for things that you care about. And I think that you all are already at a great start and way ahead of where I was. So it's inspiring to see, but that would be my big piece of advice.
Well, thank you so much, Victoria. It's so great to hear. And I think, it's really inspirational for so many of us to think about, okay, what are the issues that affect us on a daily basis, and how can we work to create a positive change to improve these issues and improve our lives? I know that for so many of us watching, school and education, those are a part of our daily schedules, whether you're a student or a teacher or a parent. And so next up, we have speaker Lindsay Donaldson. Ms. Donaldson is going to talk about civic engagement in the classroom. So whenever you're ready, thank you.
Thank you. Is my audio okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So for me, my kind of civic journey actually started, not to sound cliche, but on September 12th, 2001, when I had a social studies teacher. I was in 8th grade at the time. His name was Mr. Andreessen, and he came in the day after the 9/11 attacks, and he said, we're dropping our entire day's lessons for today: math, science, reading, history, everything. And we are just going to talk about what happened and why it happened. And for me, I will be completely honest, I don't remember a thing he said, but I do remember the impact of hearing that, this event happened because of what societies are like across the world. It happened because of historical events, and it happened because of current political climates. And little 13-year-old me just thought, oh my goodness, like there's so much involved in just the little headlines that we read every day. And so for me, that was the moment where I realized it became very important to realize what was going on, not only in the United States, but all around the world, and to educate myself on how to participate in those things. And that really is part of the drive that led me to become a social studies teacher. Because I realized how complicated all of this is and how difficult it can be for youth to involve themselves without people to tell them about the pathways to get into the political process. We, as people in a democratic republic, really do have power with our voices, whether it's through the voting process or whether it's through the First Amendment protected rights of assembly and petition and speech and press. And I think over the last couple of weeks, we've seen that more profoundly, really, than at any time in my adult life, the impact that these Black Lives Matter protests have had on altering the governmental process. But as Spider-Man would say, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that the responsibility that we have as citizens is to educate ourselves. Because if we are going to help drive the ship, we should know how to drive. And part of that is learning about why things are the way that they are, the history of social institutions, whether it's the history of the civil rights movement or the history of the Ku Klux Klan, learning about your rights, why you have them and how you got them, learning about social ideologies, political ideologies, and economic ideologies, so that when a civic servant, a politician says, I stand for this, you know what you're voting for. And at MHS, like, we've done a really good job of that. You have Mr. Venezia doing US legal and applications of law. You have the amazing teachers in Marblehead teaching us about the history, the psychology, the sociology, ring my own bell there a little bit. But it continues after high school, after college. If we are going to be educated citizens, we have to read, we have to know what's going on, we have to pay attention. And you know, for me, really one of the big things that made an impact on me is learning that my voice does matter. And that the first time I learned that was when I taught something to students and then I had them respond back to me. And I saw what I had said on social media, and I realized that individual voices really do just make such an incredible difference. It is tempting on the part of a lot of people to say, I'm not going to touch that in politics. We're going to leave that to the experts. We're going to leave that to the professionals. But among other things, as I think you touched on a little bit, Ms. Ehrlich, is what our civic servants are professionals in is listening to the needs of their people. And if we're not telling them what our needs are, they can't help us. They can't address the problems, the gaps, the issues in our society unless the people can address those things and say, hey, here's a dearth and we need to address this. We need to address a problem. So part of the importance of civic education is sort of teaching youth where to start, because it does start in high school, it continues in college, but throughout your entire adult life, in order to contribute to a healthy democracy, you need to read articles. Not only articles that echo your own point of view, I know that those are very satisfying to read, but articles that talk about the opposing point of view so that you can say, okay, all right, I get it. I may not agree, but I understand. And that makes it so much easier to communicate, to cooperate, to collaborate on making the country good for everybody. And I feel like that addresses the problem of people ending up in echo chambers where the only people that they really communicate with are people that do share their ideas and that do agree with them and that will just sort of echo their own thoughts back to them. The more we know about what happened in the past, what's happening now, why it's happening, how people work, how people think, the more we can do to really, I feel, create a state, a town, a nation that can address the needs of everybody. I really feel like a lot of the problems that we have in our nation today are from maybe people just not really knowing what they can do to help, or just not really knowing the truth. And part of what we need to do as educators, but also part of what we need to do as citizens, is make sure that we can think critically, we can weed through the fake news and the real news, that we have a basis, a foundation, so that when we see an article or a speech that contradicts something that we believe in, we can go, let me think about that and let me research that. Part of what I was really impressed by in the stories that have been told so far, Representative, I like when you said that you were just a citizen and then you did research and you did the footwork and you reached out to the right people and you basically taught yourself how to be politically involved. I think that that is so impressive, and that really is the story of the United States as it should be, is citizens who see a problem and teach themselves or learn how to address that problem, and that really is the foundation of our healthy democracy.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Ms. Donaldson. It looks like you may have frozen, so I'm not sure if you had more to say, but I think it actually wrapped up quite nicely. I know that you and so many other teachers during this pandemic have truly been the unsung heroes. I know that myself and my fellow students really appreciate your hard work continuing to teach us in these difficult circumstances. And now, as we transition into this next phase of our discussion, I ask everyone at home to please type any questions that you may have for our speakers into the chat box on your screen. You can direct these questions to specific speakers or to the entire panel, so please let us know what you want to learn about these four. Again, if you're on a computer, this chat box should be to the right. I see that people have already taken advantage of it, started to leave some positive comments, so thank you. Okay, it may just be a technical difficulty, so hopefully we'll get Ms. Donaldson back soon. In the meantime, again, if you're on a computer, that chat box is to the right, and if you're on a phone, it should be at the bottom. May Genevieve will be picking out many of your questions and sending them to me to ask our speakers, so we can't wait to hear from you. And while we wait for your questions to roll in, which by the way, you can also send to our Instagram at marbleheadhs.dems on Instagram. But as we wait for those questions to roll in, I know that personally, I wanted to start by asking you, was there ever a time in your work as an activist when you collaborated with someone who you disagreed with in order to solve a problem that affected you both? If so, how did you lead this sort of compromise? After thinking for a minute, maybe Representative Ehrlich, would you like to start us off? Ms. Donaldson.
I'm so sorry about that. This is the most embarrassing thing. My cat just walked by and knocked my computer off of the table. This technology, man, technology. Anyway, I was finished though, so you can go on.
Yeah, you did a great job. And we were just leading into our first question, asking if there was ever a time when you had to work with someone who you may have disagreed with in order to find a solution to a problem that affected you both. So Lori, would you like to start us off, please?
Sure. Sophie, the way you introduced the question, you said as an activist. So I'm going to go back to my time as an activist because I do this every day, all day at work, because it is the only way to succeed, by talking to people, building coalitions, getting people on board with your idea. And, it's every day, literally every day. So, but I'm going to go back to when I was just this accountant who was who was trying to clean up a drinking water supply for 80,000 people that wasn't even her own drinking water supply, and trying to get people's buy-in that there was a problem. And we had a lot of pushback. The property that was dumped on was actually at one time owned by 3 brothers, and the 4th brother was actually the mayor of Beverly years ago. But the 3 brothers stopped paying their taxes, so the city of Beverly ended up taking this piece of property with all the toxic waste on it. So the city of Beverly was fighting us on trying to call attention to this because they were afraid that they would have the liability. So we had to get them on board. And the way we did that was on a freezing cold January day, a group of us went out onto the frozen lake, and we brought this 6-foot see-through plastic tube, a lucite tube. And we brought all the local press, elected officials that were willing to come out in the freezing cold. And we borrowed an ice auger from a fisherman, and we drilled a hole in the lake, in the ice, and we pushed this tube into the hole, pounded it into the bottom of the lake, and pulled up what was really a cross section of what was at the bottom of the lake. And we showed everybody there, including the Boston Globe was there, the Salem News, Beverly Citizen was there, all these papers that some are still clinging to life. The pictures, the flash bulbs went off, and we pushed this cross section out onto the fresh snow, and suddenly everybody could see what was next to their drinking water. And that illustration, like overnight, brought everybody on board. So the city of Beverly was suddenly on board. The Salem City Council, they were great to begin with because this was their drinking water, but it was happening in Beverly. Wenham was on board. The state suddenly was like, oh my God, we got to get, like just seeing it. And there's also something about drinking water that's a whole other conversation we can have, but drinking water freaks people out in a way that air pollution doesn't, which is one of my lifetime frustrations. But that image, that visual was a way of getting everybody around the table and getting everybody working together. So, you're not always going to have that. Sometimes it's just a conversation. Sometimes it's just an eyeball to eyeball meeting where you say, hey, listen, this is how it's impacting my community. It might be impacting your community too, or you try to find common ground. And when you strip away the ideology and the politics and everything, politics really is about people, and it really is about trying to just make life better for everybody, certainly on the state level. It gets much more ideological on the federal level, and it's such a challenging, divided time right now that this advice probably is better suited for the state. But I think on the federal level, if the federal government could come take a look at how we operate here in the state, we're not perfect, but we talk to each other. And many of my Republican colleagues are very good friends of mine. We still function here in Massachusetts. And I think the federal government used to be like this, but now everything's a crisis. And truly, these are crises going on right now. But the ideology, the further away you get from local government, the more ideological it gets. So I'm really, I think on the state level, we're able to work together and get things done. We have a very lopsided legislature politically, and being a Democrat certainly helps. But we are, talking to each other is really the only way to get things done. And every day. It's part of every day. But as an activist, that was just a really cool lesson, just to, see everybody suddenly come together when everybody was fighting beforehand. And during the fighting phase, we were showing up at public meetings with signs, and we were really, it was not easy to get people's attention. And suddenly when we did that, when we showed everybody in the freezing, on the frozen ice, it turned instantly.
Well, that's amazing. It's such a great story. Victoria, how would you respond in terms of, when you're supporting a campaign and, maybe you believe in a certain politician or a certain issue and maybe your peers do not? How do you kind of find that compromise to discuss it without it necessarily being so polarizing or potentially ripping apart relationships or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, for starters, most of my family growing up was Republican. So since then, I've had many interesting conversations. But I do want to highlight this. So, when you're campaigning, a lot of times it's voter contact, and door knocking is a great way for all of you to get involved. And there's no age requirement. It's not like voting. So strongly encouraged. But door knocking is a great experience, right? You're going to come across people that don't always agree with you, and they could be in your own political party. A lot of times we're knocking doors of registered Democrats, and sometimes they are more progressive than, the candidate you're talking about. And sometimes they're more moderate than the candidate you're talking about. And it's all about having conversations and listening to what they're saying. It's not about barking, these facts and figures and statistics. It's about listening to what they're feeling and how they're going through their daily life, and how that the candidate you're talking to them about is going to make their life better. And it has to be a story and not you telling them what you know is best. And I think those were always my greatest experiences with people that disagree, but in the end of the day, we can come together.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you, Victoria. I see now we have a question from Judith Black. Thank you, Judith, for participating tonight. You asked Ms. Donaldson, what would you tell students about our broken electoral system?
That's a tough question. One of the things that, as an educator, I feel like is a unique sort of worry for me, is that we are discouraged from sharing our own political views with students. So if I were to walk into a classroom and say the political system is broken, everybody in Washington is crazy, that's not going to go over well, and it has the added detriment of being untrue. So what we do in our classrooms, and what I really try to do, is give students as much information as possible that is concrete and factual, and then let them figure it out. If they want to then determine that our system is broken, then I also hope that I have given them the tools to fix it. So for me, it's a matter of giving them information, making sure that the information I give them is true, and as much as I possibly can, because teachers are humans too, keeping my own opinions out of it. And I have found that my students, two here among them, have done an amazing job of developing really amazing kind of whole opinions that they can then go and be active in trying to change what they believe in and what they feel passionate about. So I guess the answer is I wouldn't ever tell them that the system is broken, but I would tell them facts that allow them to develop their own sense of how they feel about the American political system and what they can do to change it if they feel like it needs changing.
Thank you so much, Ms. Donaldson. I mean, I'm sure Alexis and I can both agree as students. It's great to have classes where you're not told what the answer is and where you get to figure it out ourselves. So we really appreciate having those open dialogues. I know that Renee Keeney, actually the adult advisor of the Marblehead High School Democrats, so thank you, Renee, for everything you've done to help us coordinate tonight. She asks again to Ms. Donaldson, but also to Alexis, so hopefully we can get that kind of school student perspective. Is there more that schools could be doing that would help students light the spark between an interest in issues and getting involved politically? Alexis, do you want to start us off?
All right, sorry, it took me a second there to get off of mute, but I'm all set now. I think that education is incredibly important on so many levels. And I know I mentioned earlier Project 351, the service projects I do. I always think that education is important. It's important to learn why we're doing service projects. It's important to learn about government. So I think one of my main critiques, I guess, of the social studies curriculum at the school is that it's kind of repetitive for the US history section. So in 3rd grade, you learn about stuff and you learn about it again in 5th grade and then again in 8th grade. And so, and I'm sure again next year when I'm a junior, because it's all US history. So I think trying to diversify some of that curriculum to learn about different aspects of it. So my favorite year for social studies was my 8th grade year, just because we learned about US history. And even though some of that curriculum was repetitive from what I had learned before, there were also new aspects of history introduced. We learned a lot more about groups that usually don't get a voice, I think. And so that's, I think, important, just teaching people more about the big picture, not just giving them a small kind of view of everything, just saying like, these are the founding fathers and America was founded because they fought against Great Britain and King George III. So I think using education and then people taking what they learn in school and then applying it outside in their life. And I think maybe starting some clubs at a younger age to help people get civically engaged, because with Project 351, that was such a great experience for me as an ambassador, because I was able to get involved in a way that I wasn't able to be involved before. And I think a great organization in town is Spur, and that's not necessarily political, but I think just giving more opportunities for young people to be involved, because there aren't always opportunities for young people in service and politics.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Alexis. I mean, I completely agree. And I know that to all of our 8th graders here tonight, I know that the curriculum has now changed to being a civics-based class, which is so exciting. And, you know, I remember being in 8th grade during recent elections and maybe feeling kind of without a voice because I couldn't vote. So I hope you all feel encouraged, not only when you come to the high school, but also just, you know, find things within the community. Speaking of community events, we have from Frank Kashner. He asks, the recent Black Lives Matter rally in Marblehead was amazing. What do you think students will develop from here? I think this is a question that, you know, whether or not you're from Marblehead, whether or not you are a student, I would love to hear all of our perspectives on this, just because this is such a current event that is, you know, changing as we speak. So does anyone have any ideas on how we might want to build from this initial movement? Yeah, Alexis.
So I attended the protest, and I'm not always great with time management, so I was trying to make a sign, and it was a very quick poster that I was making. And so my family was kind of right at the walk as it was starting. So we stood on the sidewalk and we're going to join at the end so that we weren't cutting anyone off. And as people were walking by, I saw so many people that I know from so many different groups that I participate in. And a lot of them were people that I recognized from school. And I think that what's important about this is something that young people are really being involved in, because so many of us see what a big issue this is, and we're learning how deeply entrenched in society this issue is. And so I think that going forward, students are going to try to be more involved in this. And I hope, because I know on social media, we're seeing this momentum, especially from young people posting about it, sharing resources on Instagram. And so I think that what's going to happen is people are going to stay involved, because I know I wasn't educated enough on racism before, and I'm still not now. And I think that's always going to be a learning process. But I think people are going to make more of an effort to learn about it and learn how to be an ally going forward. And one thing that we were talking about on the meeting today is trying to hold more protests and vigils in Marblehead. And so I'm hoping that we will see, if we can get those events up and running, I'm hoping that we will see sustained participation. And I'm hoping that going forward in the long term, we'll see sustained participation in issues like these.
Get out of here. So sorry, it took me a second to unmute. I just wanted to add to that. I feel like one of the most important things that has come out of this is the fact that we are
talking about racial issues and about systemic issues. I don't know if this is something that's shared with everyone, but I know for me, racism was one of those like words when I was with my friends, when I was with my family, other adults in my life. There was always this sense of like, oh, we fixed that during the civil rights movement, and it's not really worth talking about anymore because racism is bad and everyone can agree with that. But it's such a nuanced issue that to just sort of seal it up like that and put a nice little bow on it and say, well, we fixed that, that just ignores so many, that was my cat, so many layers and nuances and ways that you can educate yourself on the history and the current events. And so it's so good that we're talking about it. You know, it's even good that, and I know that this can be very hard for some people's mental health, it's even good that we're shouting about it. And it's, you know, it's good that people are discussing it on social media, however hard that may be to see every day when you open social media. And so for me, the best part about these protests is that we've opened up a conversation that I feel like we've sort of neglected for a long time.
Just kind of following up on that, you know, I think it is wonderful. There's nothing better, in my opinion, than to see young people voice their frustration and engage in government. And, you know, building on this, in my mind, is just only, you know, starting the conversation is step one. And step two is working with your representatives to make sure that they're representing you. And if you are, you know, caring about this, and I know that definitely Representative Ehrlich is representing you and Senator Creighton, but, you know, making sure that like letters of concern, right? Like writing letters is a great way to participate, sending them to your representative, but also letters to the editor. All these things are simple acts of civic engagement and they make a big difference. And every single voice counts. And I think that you guys can change the future. And, you know, you just have to build every day and make sure that you always have that action item and never give up, because it will happen, and small incremental change is usually how you get there. So
I could say a few words. So attending that rally in Marblehead was beyond inspirational. And it blew my mind. I was guessing somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 people left their homes in the middle of a global pandemic. They felt that strongly about it, that they wanted to gather with the community and express, you know, what we're all feeling, that sense of disgust and outrage and you know, the need for justice. So it was nice to do it as a community. Also, I haven't seen too many people in person in a long time, so it was really great to just be there. You know, as a state level representative, you know, and our Senator Brendan Creighton, we have a responsibility to take this statewide. And the conversation is well underway. We have in our legislature, there's a caucus, the Black and Latino caucus, that meets regularly, and they are front and center on this issue in looking at how we police people in Massachusetts and how we can do better. So, breaking news, as I signed off to be with all of you tonight, a bill has emerged, and I'm going to give you the title of the bill. And I haven't actually even read it because it literally came out right before I got on this call. But let me just give you the name of it. It's called An Act to Save Black Lives by Transforming Public Safety. And it's a sweeping police reform package that includes, I can give you the 8 bullet points, but I can't give you any of the detail behind it. I'm going to run through it because this is such, actually, let me ask Sophie, is it okay if I run through just the bullet points?
I think we would love to hear that. Yes.
Okay. I don't want to push you into going in overtime here. So here are some of the bullet points, and this is put out by the Black and Latino Caucus, along with the Senate President and the Speaker of the House. So it's everybody working together. First bullet point is strengthen the use of force rules. 2 is new investigatory requirements within Attorney General's office. 3, it creates a duty to intervene when an officer witnesses abuse of force. We can see where that came from. Establishes that unnecessary use of force by an officer violates someone's civil rights. 5, data collection and reporting processes to prevent hire of abusive officers. 6, prohibition of no-knock warrants. 7, prohibition on the use of chokeholds, tear gas, and other dangerous, quote, less than lethal weapons and tactics. And the last bullet point is public records of police misconduct, investigations, and outcome. So outcomes, I guess. So that bill has emerged. It has seems to have a lot of force behind it. I can't express an opinion on it. I haven't read the bill yet, but there's my day tomorrow, maybe tonight. This is the conversation is about to go statewide. Up until this point, we've seen cities really stepping up and saying, okay, we're gonna, the city of Boston has kind of laid its groundwork a little bit. We're seeing, like the city of Minneapolis has really took the lead on really rethinking policing. Even before all this happened, city of Camden, New Jersey, if anybody's really watching this issue, they were way ahead of the game here. So this conversation is about to take place in the legislature. So just, keep in touch with us. If you have opinions or something about this bill going forward, you can always reach out to my office and Brendan's office, Brendan Crichton, and we are delighted to hear your opinions and engage on the issues. So Massachusetts loves to lead. So I'm glad this bill is out. I haven't heard of any states that have a bill already. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Lori, for bringing that to our attention. It's such a great representation of when the people are united behind an issue and loud and excited, change can occur rapidly, although, when you look at the history, it's not necessarily rapid, but I'm happy to see that things are changing now in Massachusetts and beyond. I see, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to everyone's questions just to respect people's time, but I kind of see this recurring theme in the questions about, what can students do as their first step? What can adults or parents or teachers do as their first step in civic engagement? So I wanted to ask all of you tonight, hopefully in maybe reverse order from when we first introduced ourselves, so starting with Ms. Donaldson and ending with Representative Ehrlich, what is one piece of advice or piece of action that you would present to our audience tonight for what they can do moving forward to transform their passion into real political action?
This may be the teacher speaking in me, but all I can think of over and over in my head is just read everything. Read everything you can get your hands on. As I said earlier, read things that support your own point of view, but as satisfying as that is, also read things that support the opposing point of view. Don't just read a snappy headline and then react to it with comments on social media. Really do the work to read. And whether that means reading the history, reading the current events, reading articles about what's happening here or around the world, or whether it means reading those bills that they're trying to pass into law, in order for you to have political literacy, you just need to have regular literacy, because that is the way that most of this is going to be communicated. And then once you read, look at the things that really touched you, that kind of made you react while you were reading, and then start looking for petitions and start calling representatives and sending letters and holding signs. But really the very first step is make sure that you know what you're fighting for and why you're fighting for it. And to do that, you really have to educate yourself, and you have to keep doing that work throughout your whole adult life, because after high school and college, people stop giving you the stuff to read and you just have to find it. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is educate yourself and keep doing that.
Thank you, Ms. Donaldson. Victoria?
I echo everything, but, I would be doing my former profession disservice if I didn't say that getting involved in a campaign is a great way for any age. You can knock doors, you can write postcards, you can make phone calls, and it's a great way to find a community. And also it's an opportunity to engage in service as well. There's service projects where you can go clean up a park with your representative. Every little bit action that you can put in, it will make this world a better place. And I'm inspired by all of you, and thank you so much for having me join tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Alexis?
Would it be okay if I share my list of 3? Okay. So I have 3 different resources that kind of encompass 3 different aspects of civic engagement. So the first one is an educational resource. It's a movie. It's also available as a book, but the movie is free for the month of June, and I encourage you all to watch it. It's called Just Mercy, and it's the story of the Equal Justice Initiative, which was founded by a man named Brian Stevenson, and they fight to help people who have been unjustly arrested or who have been in prison for a long time, and they help them to kind of integrate those people back into society. It's a phenomenal movie and it's a phenomenal organization. So if you do watch Just Mercy, please make a donation to the Equal Justice Initiative to support what they're doing. The second one is that donation aspect that I mentioned earlier. The girl Marie Copeny, look up Marie Copeny GoFundMe and it should come up. She's trying to reach the goal of $250,000 by July 6th, which is her 13th birthday. So please donate if you're able to. And then the last resource that I want to mention is sort of like a phone banking resource. So this is a concrete action step that you can take. Breonna Taylor was a woman from Louisville, Kentucky, who was murdered by police while she was sleeping. And her killers have still not been arrested unless there's been any developments while we've been on this call. But you can call different numbers in Kentucky to ask for her killers to be arrested. So I have a link that maybe Sophie can post on the YouTube description later, but it has 3 phone numbers that you can call. And again, if you can't find that link, just Google like who you can call. There's so many resources available to you to find those phone numbers and to find phone numbers for other people, because Breonna Taylor isn't the only one whose murderers are walking free right now. So.
And then finally, Lori. Thank you, Alexis.
So can you hear me? Okay, so here's the thing. My whole life leading up to that moment when the footprints kind of showed me a new path, I was under the impression that someone was taking care of it. If I saw a problem, oh, someone will get that. Someone's taking care of that. Of course, someone's taking care of that. That can't just exist as it is. What I came to find out was that nobody's taking care of it because nobody's noticing it and nobody's stepping up and everybody's busy in their lives. So I had to find my voice. And I think that is the first thing that you have to do if you want to be make a meaningful difference and actively participate in politics. You have to find your own voice, figure out where your passions are, figure out, what change you want to see, and then just go for it. We have 145 days till the presidential election. There are also an awful lot of Senate seats that are going to be on that ballot and a lot of House seats, and local seats as well. Local state level seats. So there's lots you can get involved in. There's lots of ways to express your opinion. There's lots of ways to help out. It's a weird election because we can't knock doors and we can't, at least not yet, and maybe not at all. So you guys, young people, you're so adept with electronics and you're so good at networking and you're so good at this. And you don't realize how much training it takes us older folk to get up to speed to where you are already. So stand up and get involved and reach out to campaigns. There's always, if you want to call up a campaign, there's always somebody there to connect with you. And right now it's your future. It's your everything on the line. So you really do, you have no choice. Get engaged. And then after the election, it's not just about voting. Stay engaged. Don't just say, well, I did my civic duty, I'm going to go back to my life now. Stay engaged. Because, I think, once people are elected, they need to know people still care, and they need to be held accountable too. So I think it's really important. This is an important discussion we're having tonight. Sophie and Alexis, you give me so much hope. You really do. You guys, we need to clone you just by the thousands. Victoria, I've loved working with you. I have so much respect for your story. And Ms. Donaldson, you have the youth of our town, in your classroom, and you can shape young minds. So I'm grateful for all of the work of all my fellow panelists, and mostly good for you, Sophie, for stepping up, and for Renee, of course, as always, there to support your group. So I'm honored to be here, but that's my final thought.
Well, thank you so much, Lori, and thank you to everyone for saying such kind, thoughtful words. I know that I'm feeling inspired, and I'm sure that the people at home are feeling inspired too. I mean, if I can just try to sum up what everyone's saying, you all said it so well, but I think that the truth here is that, absorb as much information as you can. We're all on social media. We're all constantly looking online, constantly speaking with our friends. Learn, absorb that information, learn about different issues, and find something that you care about. I think the answer to our question, why should you care? Find something that you care about. Keep reading, keep looking, because at one point or another, we hear it from, whether it's Alexis with the Amazon rainforest, or Lori when you're talking about the city footprints, or Victoria with the economic recession, or Ms. Donaldson just continuing to allow young students to form their own opinions. We see that once you find an issue that doesn't sit right with you, you can't not care. You can't not act on it. I think back to February of 2018, I think it was, the Parkland shooting happened on February 14th. And I remember it being at school that day. It was Valentine's Day. And I felt, I think before I had cared, just like Alexis, I had cared about issues. I had never acted on that before. And then I remember thinking, these students are grieving and they are still protesting. It's the exact same thing as this Black Lives Matter movement going on. People are grieving, and yet they're going into the streets and they are acting on that grief. And I thought, if they can do that, why can't I? I think, it really is such a parallel. I think that was gun violence. This is gun violence. If this issue doesn't sit right with you, do something about it. Don't let it sit with you. Keep feeling uneasy. I think that we wanted to direct people towards the end of this discussion with some other resources. So tomorrow we will be sending you all a follow-up email with some of the things that Alexis mentioned. I also wanted to quickly bring up, with the Marblehead High School Democrats this past year, one of our major issues has been education. So we worked together to compile a document. I have it right here. It's called the Youth Activism Guide. We were going to bring it out at school, but of course we ended up printing them out right before we left. But it covers 3 major issues that we believe impact young people, including climate change, gun control, and healthcare reform. So I will attach this document tomorrow. Of course, we would love for any students who are here, if you are interested, please join the Marblehead High School Democrats. Even if you're an 8th grader, this group doesn't have to be, even if you're not necessarily, you wouldn't consider yourself a political expert or someone who leans one way or another. We're working for social justice initiatives and trying to make a change. So I appreciate everyone being here tonight. And whether you're in the high school, you're already graduated, again, look around town for different groups. I know at the high school, alongside our group, there's the Environmental Honor Society, Team Harmony that Alexis mentioned. Even if you take the service learning class, which discusses the ways in which you can create positive change in your community, there's so many channels for getting involved. And I would like to just encourage us to all seek out these groups. I think that otherwise, with the focus in America right now, on racial justice, we will of course be sending you some resources on action on racial injustice. We will also be sending you some resources about other issues. So look out in your email tomorrow for these resources, because I think we see here that when a community is full of people who are working together to create a change, who are learning about change, learning what they can do, something's going to happen. I think we're building that tonight, and I'm really excited. So once more, I want to thank our amazing speakers for logging on tonight. Lori, Alexis, Victoria, and Ms. Donaldson, you are all making the world a better place with your continued efforts, and we appreciate your hard work. To our audience, I thank you for your time tonight and ongoing willingness to learn and work. We're truly in this together. With that being said, I will be closing out tonight's discussion. I hope that everyone has a great evening, and I wish that you are all safe and healthy in the days to come. Thank you again, and good night. Okay.